My name is Catherine Hayes, and I'm 29 years old. For 7 years, I watched my incompetent brother destroy the tech company my grandfather built from nothing while my parents praised his every failure as learning experiences. I had the MIT degree, the innovation skills, and the vision to save our family legacy. But I was born female, so none of that mattered. When they officially handed him the CEO position last spring, something inside me shifted. What happened next didn't just expose my brother's complete inability to run a business. It revealed a paper trail of fraud that brought federal investigators to our door and left my parents begging me to save what was left of our empire. Before I tell you how I went from being the overlooked daughter to watching my brother get arrested on live television, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy stories about incompetence meeting consequences. I'd love to know what family businesses you've seen destroyed by favoritism. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to that March morning when everything started unraveling. I was in my cramped office at Dataflow Solutions, the struggling startup where I'd been hiding my talents for 2 years, when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Catherine, family meeting tonight at 7. Important announcement about Hayes Tech's future. I stared at the message, my coffee growing cold. Hayes Tech, the cybersecurity company my grandfather had founded in 1987, with nothing but a computer science degree from Boston University and an unshakable work ethic. By the time I was born, it had grown into a $50 million operation, protecting financial institutions across New England from cyber threats. My grandfather used to bounce me on his knee in his corner office, pointing at lines of code on his screen. "See this, Katie? This is how we keep the bad guys out. Someday, you'll build walls even stronger than mine." He died when I was 16, but not before teaching me everything he knew about cybersecurity, network architecture, and the art of staying 3 steps ahead of hackers. While my friends were posting selfies, I was writing encryption algorithms for fun. While my brother Michael was partying his way through state school, I was graduating summa cum laude from MIT with degrees in computer science and business administration. But when my grandfather's will was read, the language was clear. The business passes to the eldest male heir capable of leadership. My parents interpreted that as Michael, despite his complete lack of technical knowledge, his business degree from a school barely ranked in the top 100, and his track record of failing at literally everything he'd ever attempted. I walked into my parents' Beacon Hill home that evening, past the family photos lining the hallway. There I was at my MIT graduation, standing proudly next to my parents and Michael. There was Michael at his college graduation, looking uncomfortable in his cap and gown. But the largest photo, mounted in the position of honor, showed Michael shaking hands with some technology executive at a conference he'd attended as Hayes Tech's future leader. My parents sat in the living room with Michael, all wearing matching expressions of barely contained excitement. My mother, Patricia, gestured for me to sit in the chair across from them, the same chair where I'd been lectured about being more supportive of your brother's vision countless times over the past 7 years. "Catherine," my father Robert began, his voice carrying that formal tone he used for important business discussions. "We've made a decision about Hayes Tech's leadership structure." I waited, though we all knew what was coming. "Michael will be taking over as CEO effective immediately," my mother announced, beaming at my brother like he'd just discovered a cure for cancer. "Your father and I will be transitioning to advisory roles." Michael cleared his throat and sat up straighter. At 32, he still carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his failures. "Catherine, I know this might be surprising, but I'm ready to take Hayes Tech to the next level. I have so many ideas for expansion, new market penetration, innovative solutions." I looked at him carefully. "What kind of innovative solutions, Michael?" "Well," he paused, using that thinking face that had fooled our parents for decades but never fooled me. "I'm looking at blockchain integration, maybe some AI implementation, definitely want to explore the metaverse opportunities." Buzzwords, pure, meaningless buzzwords strung together by someone who'd clearly spent his weekend reading TechCrunch headlines. "The metaverse," I repeated, "for cybersecurity." "Exactly. We could create virtual security environments where clients can visualize their protection protocols." I bit my tongue, hard. Virtual security environments already existed and had for years. They were called network monitoring dashboards, and Haystack had been providing them since 2018. But Michael wouldn't know that because he'd never bothered to learn what our company actually did. My father leaned forward. Michael's vision is exactly what Haystack needs to compete with the big players like CrowdStrike and Palo Alto Networks. Have you seen our latest financial reports? I asked quietly. My mother waved dismissively. Michael will grow into the role. Your grandfather started from nothing too. Grandfather started with deep technical knowledge and spent 60-hour weeks learning the business. What's Michael's technical background again? The room went silent. Michael's jaw tightened. Catherine, I don't need to be a coder to be a leader. I understand the business side, the strategy, the vision. What's our current client retention rate? I asked. I mean those details are. 87%, I said, down from 94% when grandfather died. What's our average time to resolve a security incident? Catherine, my father interrupted, this isn't a quiz. Michael has our confidence. I'm just trying to understand his vision, I said calmly. Michael, what's our biggest competitive advantage in the mid-market cybersecurity space? My brother's face flushed red. Look, I don't need to memorize statistics to lead this company. Leadership is about inspiration, about big picture thinking. So you don't know, it wasn't a question. I know enough, he snapped, and I know that questioning your CEO in front of the board isn't professional behavior. The board, Dad, Mom, and you? That's not a board, Michael, that's a family meeting. My mother's voice turned sharp. Catherine, your brother is trying to share his vision with us. The least you can do is be supportive. I stood up. You want to know what I think about Michael's vision? They waited. I think you're about to destroy everything grandfather built. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stood up too, his voice rising. You're jealous. You've always been jealous that you're not the chosen one. Well, guess what, Catherine? Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about inspiring people, building relationships, thinking strategically. You're right, I said quietly. Leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room, but it helps to know what room you're in. I walked toward the door. Where are you going? My father called. Home. Congratulations, Michael. I hope your blockchain metaverse AI solutions work out. I left them there, 3 people convinced they'd just made a brilliant decision, completely unaware that they'd just lit a very expensive fuse. The next morning, I submitted my resignation from Dataflow Solutions. My boss, Jennifer Martinez, looked genuinely surprised. Catherine, you're our best systems architect. Whatever they're offering you, we'll match it. I smiled. It's not about money, Jen. I need to start my own company. Doing what? Cybersecurity consulting. Small to mid-market businesses that need enterprise-level protection but can't afford enterprise-level prices. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. That's a crowded space. You'll be competing with established players. I'll be competing with one established player in particular. She studied my face. This is about your family's company, isn't it? I nodded. My brother just took over. He's about to make some very expensive mistakes. When he does, I want to be ready to catch his clients when they start looking for competent alternatives. That's cold, Catherine. That's business. I spent the next 3 weeks setting up Fortress Security Solutions in a shared workspace in Cambridge, just across the river from Hayes Tech's downtown Boston headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on me. The name was a deliberate reference to my grandfather's philosophy. We don't just protect data, Katie. We build fortresses that keep the barbarians at the gate. My first hire was David Chen, a brilliant network security specialist who'd been laid off from a larger firm. My second was Maria Santos, a former FBI cybercrime analyst who'd gone private. By the end of month 1, we had a team of 5, all experienced professionals who'd been overlooked or undervalued by larger companies. Meanwhile, I started monitoring Hayes Tech's public activities. Michael had wasted no time putting his stamp on the company. He'd updated the website with a sleek new design full of buzzwords like next-generation security solutions and AI-powered threat detection. The the actual technical details had been reduced to vague marketing speak. He'd also started a company blog where he positioned himself as a thought leader in cybersecurity. His first post, titled The Future of Digital Defense, was 800 words of generic predictions about cloud security and zero trust architectures. It could have been written by any business school graduate with access to Google. But the real intelligence came from my former colleagues who still worked at Haystack. I'd maintained friendships with the technical staff, the people who actually understood the systems my grandfather had built. They started reaching out, not to gossip, but to share their genuine concerns about the company's direction. Catherine, my old colleague James Wilson, called me on a Thursday afternoon. I don't know if I should be telling you this, but Michael just approved a complete overhaul of our core security platform. What kind of overhaul? He wants to replace grandfather's custom architecture with an off-the-shelf solution. Says it's more scalable and cost-effective. I nearly dropped my phone. My grandfather's custom platform was Haystack's secret weapon. It was specifically designed for the unique needs of New England financial institutions, with custom protocols that provided security levels that generic solutions couldn't match. James, that platform is what differentiates Haystack from every other cybersecurity firm in the region. I know, I told him that. He said differentiation doesn't matter if we can't scale efficiently. What did the technical team say? We're not being consulted. Michael hired an outside consulting firm to handle the transition. They're supposed to start implementation next month. I thanked James and hung up, staring at my laptop screen. This was worse than I'd imagined. Michael wasn't just incompetent, he was actively dismantling the competitive advantages that had kept Haystack successful for over 3 decades. 2 weeks later, I got another call, this time from Sarah Mitchell, Haystack's head of client relations. Catherine, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Go ahead, Sarah. Are you starting a competing business? My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice calm. Why do you ask? Because I just got off a very uncomfortable call with Thomas Bradley at First National Bank. He asked me if I knew anything about Fortress Security Solutions and whether they were connected to Haystack. Thomas Bradley, one of Haystack's biggest clients and someone who'd known my grandfather personally. What did you tell him? I told him I'd never heard of Fortress Security. But Catherine, he said someone approached him at a banking conference last week with a very detailed understanding of Haystack's services and a proposal to provide similar protection at a lower cost. I hadn't approached Thomas Bradley, but apparently word was getting around that there was a new player in town with deep knowledge of the local cybersecurity landscape. Sarah, has Michael made any major changes to client services? She was quiet for a moment. He's talking about standardizing our offerings, reducing custom solutions in favor of scalable packages. And how are clients responding to that? Not well. Thomas Bradley specifically asked if we were moving away from the personalized approach that made Haystack special. After Sarah hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the Cambridge skyline. Michael was making exactly the mistakes I'd expected, but faster than I'd anticipated. He was commoditizing a premium service, removing the custom elements that justified Haystack's higher prices, and apparently doing it without consulting the people who actually delivered those services. But I wasn't going to compete by poaching clients. That would be too easy to trace back to me, and it would give Michael ammunition to blame his failures on my sabotage. Instead, I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to be ready when his mistakes caught up with him. I called a team meeting for the next morning. David, Maria, and our 3 other team members gathered in our small conference room, coffee cups in hand, ready to hear what I'd learned. Haystack is about to make a series of strategic errors, I began. They're moving away from custom solutions, replacing their proprietary platform with generic alternatives, and standardizing their services. Within 6 months, they're going to start losing clients who are looking for the specialized, high-touch security services that made Haystack successful. Maria leaned forward. So we position ourselves to capture those clients? Not exactly. We position ourselves to provide what Haystack is abandoning: premium, customized cybersecurity solutions for organizations that need more than cookie cutter protection. David nodded slowly. We become what they used to be. Exactly. We build the company my grandfather would have built if he were starting today, with today's technology and today's threats. Over the next 3 months, we did exactly that. We developed a proprietary platform that combined the custom approach of my grandfather's original architecture with modern AI-driven threat detection. We created service packages specifically designed for the mid-market financial institutions that were Haystack's bread and butter. Most importantly, we built relationships with the technical decision makers at those institutions, the CISOs and IT directors who actually understood what they were buying. I made sure to stay visible in the cybersecurity community without directly competing with Haystack. I spoke at conferences about emerging threats. I published technical papers on advanced persistent threats targeting financial institutions. I built a reputation as an expert who understood both the technical and business sides of cybersecurity. And I waited. The first crack in Michael's facade appeared in June, 4 months after he'd taken over as CEO. I was having coffee with Rebecca Turner, a cybersecurity consultant who worked with several of Haystack's clients, when she mentioned something interesting. Catherine, I have to ask you something confidential. Are you familiar with Haystack's new platform implementation? I know they're updating their systems. Why? Because I just spent 2 hours on a call with their technical team, and they couldn't answer basic questions about data encryption standards. The client was asking about compliance with the new Massachusetts data protection regulations, and Haystack's people kept referring them to documentation that doesn't seem to exist. This was exactly what I'd been expecting. Michael's off-the-shelf solution wasn't designed for the specific regulatory environment that Massachusetts financial institutions operated in. My grandfather's custom platform had been built with those regulations in mind, with features and protections that generic solutions couldn't provide. Have you heard similar concerns from other clients? I asked carefully. 3 in the past 2 weeks, all asking the same questions about compliance, all getting vague answers from Haystack's support team. I finished my coffee and thanked Rebecca for the information. When I got back to my office, I pulled up the Massachusetts Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulations' latest cybersecurity requirements for financial institutions. Then I cross-referenced them with the capabilities of the generic platform Michael had chosen to implement. The gaps were significant, not illegal necessarily, but certainly not the gold standard of protection that Haystack's clients had come to expect. More importantly, they were gaps that could lead to compliance issues if Massachusetts regulators decided to audit a financial institution's cybersecurity practices. I called James Wilson that evening. James, hypothetically, if a Massachusetts bank were audited tomorrow, would Haystack's new platform meet all the state's cybersecurity requirements for financial institutions? There was a long pause. Catherine, I can't discuss specific technical capabilities. I'm not asking about specific capabilities. I'm asking if you're confident that your clients are fully compliant with state regulations. Another pause. I think clients might want to conduct their own compliance reviews. That was all I needed to hear. James was essentially telling me that Haystack's technical team wasn't confident in their new platform's ability to meet regulatory requirements. In the financial services world, might want to conduct their own compliance reviews was code for, we can't guarantee you won't fail an audit. The next morning, I drafted a white paper titled Cybersecurity Compliance in the Massachusetts Financial Sector, a technical analysis of regulatory requirements. It was 14 pages of detailed technical analysis, examining exactly what Massachusetts financial institutions needed to do to comply with state cybersecurity regulations. I didn't mention Haystack once, but anyone reading it would understand the compliance gaps that generic cybersecurity platforms might leave unfilled. I submitted the paper to the Massachusetts Bankers Association and the Boston Security Analysts Society. Within 2 weeks, it was circulating throughout the local financial services community. The response was immediate. My phone started ringing with calls from compliance officers and CISOs at banks and credit unions throughout New England. They weren't asking me to replace their current cybersecurity providers. They were asking me to conduct compliance audits of their existing security arrangements. Ms. Hayes, the caller from Middlesex Community Bank said, "We've been working with Hayes Tech for 8 years, but your white paper raised some questions about our current compliance posture. Would Fortress Security be able to conduct an independent assessment of our cybersecurity program?" "Absolutely," I replied. "We specialize in compliance auditing for financial institutions." By the end of July, we had contracts to conduct compliance audits for 12 financial institutions, 8 of which were Hayes Tech clients. I wasn't competing with Michael's company directly. I was simply providing an independent service that would evaluate whether their current cybersecurity arrangements met regulatory requirements. The results were exactly what I'd expected. Of the 8 Hayes Tech clients we audited, 6 had significant compliance gaps related to data encryption standards, incident response procedures, and audit trail requirements. These weren't catastrophic failures, but they were the kind of issues that could lead to regulatory sanctions if discovered during a state audit. We provided detailed reports to each client, outlining the specific areas where their current cybersecurity arrangements might not fully comply with Massachusetts regulations. We also provided recommendations for addressing those gaps, most of which would require either significant modifications to their current systems or migration to platforms specifically designed for Massachusetts financial institutions. I made sure each report was professionally written, technically accurate, and completely factual. I didn't criticize Hayes Tech or recommend that clients switch providers. I simply documented the compliance gaps and provided technical solutions for addressing them. The clients took it from there. The first call came from Thomas Bradley at First National Bank. "Catherine, I need to ask you about this compliance audit your team conducted. According to your report, our current cybersecurity platform may not fully comply with Massachusetts data protection requirements." "That's correct, Mr. Bradley. The gaps aren't necessarily violations, but they could potentially create compliance issues if regulators conduct a detailed audit. Hayes Tech told us their new platform would meet all regulatory requirements. I can only report on what we found during our technical assessment. You might want to discuss these findings with Hayes Tech's technical team." We tried. They told us the compliance gaps were theoretical and unlikely to be an issue in practice. I said nothing. Thomas Bradley was a sophisticated client who understood that theoretical compliance gaps had a way of becoming very real problems when regulators got involved. "Catherine, if we wanted to address these compliance gaps, what would you recommend?" "That depends on your specific risk tolerance and regulatory requirements. We could certainly discuss options." 2 weeks later, First National Bank terminated their contract with Hayes Tech and signed an agreement with Fortress Security Solutions for comprehensive cybersecurity services. They weren't just buying compliance. They were buying the kind of customized, high-touch service that Hayes Tech had abandoned. The second client followed 2 weeks after that, then a third. By September, 4 of Hayes Tech's long-term clients had switched to Fortress Security, all citing concerns about regulatory compliance and the need for more personalized service. I made sure to handle each transition professionally. We worked closely with Hayes Tech's technical team during the migrations, ensuring minimal disruption to the client's operations. I never criticized Michael's decisions publicly or tried to undermine Hayes Tech's reputation. I simply provided superior service to clients who were looking for alternatives. But Michael apparently saw things differently. I was in my office on a Thursday afternoon in October when my assistant buzzed me. "Catherine, your brother is here to see you." I looked up from my laptop. "Michael's here." "He's in the lobby. He says it's urgent." I walked to the lobby of our shared workspace, where Michael stood in his expensive suit, looking completely out of place among the startup entrepreneurs and freelance developers who populated the building. "Michael, what brings you to Cambridge?" "We need to talk." His voice was tight, controlled, privately. I led him to our small conference room, closing the door behind us. He sat down across from me, his hands folded on the table. "You're poaching our clients," he said without preamble. "I'm providing cybersecurity services to organizations that choose to work with us." "Don't play games, Catherine. 4 of our long-term clients have switched to your company in the past 3 months. That's not a coincidence." I leaned back in my chair. "Michael, these clients made their own decisions based on their own business needs. If they chose to work with us, it's because we're providing something they want. You're providing compliance audits that make Hayes Tech look incompetent. I'm providing accurate technical assessments of cybersecurity programs. If those assessments reflect poorly on any particular vendor, that's not my fault." Michael's face was getting red, the same way it used to when we were kids and he couldn't get his way. "You're sabotaging us. You're using inside knowledge to target our clients." "What inside knowledge, Michael?" "The Massachusetts cybersecurity regulations that are publicly available. The technical standards that every financial institution has to meet. The compliance requirements that have been in place for years. You know our platform's limitations because you used to work there. I know cybersecurity because I have an MIT degree in computer science and 7 years of experience in the field. The limitations of your platform are obvious to anyone who understands the technical requirements." Michael stood up. "This stops now, Catherine. You're destroying our family business out of spite." I stood up too. "I'm building my own business based on my own skills and knowledge. If that's a problem for Hayes Tech, maybe Hayes Tech should examine why clients are choosing alternatives. You can't compete with us forever. We have resources, established relationships, market presence." "You had those things," I said quietly. "The question is whether you still deserve them." Michael stared at me for a long moment. "You're going to regret this." "The only thing I regret is waiting so long to start." He left without another word, and I returned to my office. But his visit had confirmed something important. Hayes Tech was feeling the pressure. Losing 4 major clients in 3 months was significant for a company their size, especially when those clients were long-term relationships that had been considered secure. More importantly, Michael was reacting emotionally instead of strategically. Instead of examining why clients were leaving and addressing the underlying issues, he was looking for someone to blame. That kind of thinking wouldn't solve Hayes Tech's problems. It would just create new ones. I was right. 2 weeks after Michael's visit, I received a call from David Murphy, the general counsel at Beacon Financial Services, one of Hayes Tech's remaining major clients. "Catherine, I need to ask you something confidentially. Have you had any contact from Hayes Tech regarding your business relationship with other financial institutions?" "What kind of contact?" "Michael Hayes called me yesterday. He suggested that Fortress Security might be using unethical competitive practices to win business from Hayes Tech clients. He implied that you might be sharing confidential information about Hayes Tech services." I felt my blood pressure rise. "Mr. Murphy, I can assure you that Fortress Security has never used confidential information from any source to compete for business. Our services are based on publicly available regulatory requirements and our own technical expertise." I figured as much, but Michael was quite insistent. He suggested that financial institutions working with both companies might be creating conflicts of interest. This was exactly the wrong approach. Instead of focusing on improving Hayes Tech services, Michael was trying to prevent clients from working with competitors. It was the kind of desperate move that made companies look weak and unreliable. "Mr. Murphy, Fortress Security works with many clients who also work with other cybersecurity providers. We maintain strict confidentiality protocols and would never use information from one client relationship to benefit another. If Hayes Tech has concerns about specific practices, they're welcome to address them directly with us." That's what I told Michael. But Catherine, I have to warn you, he seemed pretty angry. He mentioned something about taking legal action if necessary. Legal action? Michael was threatening to sue me for competing with him. It was the kind of threat that successful executives never made because they were too busy outcompeting their rivals to waste time in court. "Thank you for the warning, Mr. Murphy. If Haystack chooses to pursue legal action, we'll address it through appropriate channels. But I knew Michael wouldn't actually sue. A lawsuit would require him to specify exactly how I was allegedly harming Haystack's business, which would mean documenting all the clients who had left and all the reasons they had given. It would also open Haystack's business practices to scrutiny during the discovery process. Michael wasn't stupid enough to invite that kind of examination. Instead, he was going to try to damage my reputation through whisper campaigns and innuendo. He was going to tell anyone who would listen that I was using unethical tactics to steal Haystack's clients. The problem with that strategy was that it required people to believe Michael's version of events over mine. And by November, Michael's credibility in the cybersecurity community was starting to wear thin. The turning point came at the Northeast Cybersecurity Summit in Boston, an annual conference that brought together security professionals from throughout the region. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about regulatory compliance, while Michael was giving a keynote address on the future of cybersecurity leadership. I arrived at the Boston Convention Center on a cold November morning, registration badge in hand, ready to network with colleagues and potential clients. The cybersecurity community in New England was relatively small, and most of the attendees knew both me and Michael by reputation. Michael's keynote was scheduled for 9 a.m., right after the opening remarks. I found a seat toward the back of the auditorium, curious to see how he would present himself to a room full of technical experts. He took the stage confidently, wearing an expensive suit and carrying himself with the authority of someone who ran a $50 million company. His presentation slides were professionally designed, full of charts and graphs about cybersecurity market trends. The cybersecurity landscape is evolving rapidly, he began. Organizations that want to stay ahead of emerging threats need to embrace scalable, AI-driven solutions that can adapt to changing risk environments. It was a reasonable opening, the kind of high-level strategic talk that conference organizers loved. But then Michael started getting into specifics. At Haystack, we've recently implemented a next-generation platform that leverages machine learning algorithms to provide predictive threat detection across multiple attack vectors. I pulled out my phone and opened the technical specifications for the platform Michael had chosen to implement. It was a solid, enterprise-level security solution, but it didn't have the advanced machine learning capabilities he was describing. Those features were available in the premium version of the software, which cost 3 times as much as the standard version Haystack had purchased. Michael continued describing features that his platform didn't have, using technical terms that he clearly didn't understand, making claims about capabilities that existed only in marketing brochures. Our AI-driven behavioral analysis engine can detect zero-day exploits by identifying anomalous network patterns that traditional signature-based systems would miss. The behavioral analysis engine he was describing was a premium add-on that Haystack hadn't purchased. I knew this because James Wilson had mentioned in one of our conversations that they'd specifically decided against the premium features to keep costs manageable. But Michael wasn't just exaggerating his platform's capabilities. He was fundamentally misunderstanding how those capabilities worked. Behavioral analysis engines didn't detect zero-day exploits by identifying network patterns. They detected suspicious user behavior that might indicate compromised accounts or insider threats. I looked around the auditorium. The audience was full of cybersecurity professionals who understood these technologies intimately. They knew the difference between marketing claims and technical reality, and they were starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats. During the Q&A session, the questions came fast and hard. "Mr. Hayes," asked Jennifer Walsh, a senior security architect from Boston Financial Group, "can you explain how your behavioral analysis engine differentiates between legitimate administrative activities and potentially malicious privilege escalation?" Michael paused, clearly struggling with the technical terminology. "Well, our AI algorithms are trained to recognize patterns that indicate unauthorized access attempts. But what about legitimate administrative activities that might appear anomalous to an automated system? How do you minimize false positives? The system is very sophisticated. It learns from user behavior patterns and adjusts its sensitivity accordingly. It was a generic answer that could apply to any behavioral analysis system. Jennifer's follow up question was more pointed. What's your false positive rate for privilege escalation alerts? I don't have those specific metrics with me, but our platform performs very well in testing environments. There was a murmur through the audience. Any CEO of a cybersecurity company should know their platform's false positive rates, especially for something as critical as privilege escalation detection. The next question came from Robert Chang, the CISO at Massachusetts General Hospital. Mr. Hayes, you mentioned zero-day exploit detection. Can you walk us through how your system would handle a novel attack that exploits a previously unknown vulnerability in, say, a web application framework? Michael's face went slightly pale. Our system uses advanced heuristics to identify suspicious code execution patterns. But zero-day exploits by definition don't match known attack patterns. How does your heuristic analysis identify threats that don't fit existing signatures? The AI component allows the system to recognize unusual behavior, even without specific signatures. Robert leaned forward. Can you give us a technical example of how that process works? Michael looked at his watch. I think we're running short on time for detailed technical discussions, but I'd be happy to follow up with specific examples offline. The damage was done. A room full of cybersecurity professionals had just watched the CEO of a major security firm admit that he couldn't explain how his own platform's core features worked. After Michael left the stage, I made my way toward the networking area. Several people approached me immediately. Catherine, said Jennifer Walsh, that was interesting. Is Michael your brother? He is. I've heard Haystack has made some recent changes to their technical platform. They have. Jennifer lowered her voice. Boston Financial Group has been working with Haystack for 6 years, but we're starting to have concerns about their technical depth. Would Fortress Security be interested in discussing our cybersecurity requirements? By the end of the conference, I had preliminary conversations with 8 potential clients, 5 of whom were current Haystack customers. Not because I was actively soliciting their business, but because Michael's keynote had raised questions about Haystack's technical competence that those customers wanted to explore with alternatives. But the real revelation came 3 days later, when I received a call from Dr. Amanda Foster, the Chief Technology Officer at Boston University. Catherine, I attended the Cybersecurity Summit last week, and I wanted to ask you about something. Your brother mentioned that Haystack's platform includes AI-driven behavioral analysis capabilities. Is that accurate? Dr. Foster, I can't comment on Haystack's specific technical capabilities. You'd need to verify those details with their technical team directly. We tried. We've been working with Haystack for 2 years, and we specifically asked about behavioral analysis features when we were evaluating their platform. They told us those capabilities weren't included in their standard offering. This was a problem. Michael had publicly claimed that Haystack's platform included features that they apparently weren't actually providing to clients. That wasn't just incompetence, it was potential fraud. Dr. Foster, I'd recommend documenting your conversations with Haystack's technical team and asking for written confirmation of what features are included in your service agreement. That's exactly what we're doing. But Catherine, if it turns out that Haystack has been misrepresenting their technical capabilities, would Fortress Security be able to provide the behavioral analysis features that we actually need? We'd be happy to discuss your requirements. 2 weeks later, Boston University terminated their contract with Haystack and signed with Fortress Security Solutions. When I asked Dr. Foster what had prompted the switch, her answer was simple. Haystack couldn't provide written documentation of the AI features they'd been claiming to offer. When we pressed them for technical specifications, they admitted that those capabilities would require upgrading to a premium platform that would double our costs. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing our client list. In 8 months, Fortress Security had grown from 0 to 15 major clients, 8 of whom had switched from Haystack. We'd gone from 5 employees to 22, and our revenue was approaching $3 million annually. But more importantly, we'd built something that I was genuinely proud of. A company that provided real value to clients, employed talented people who'd been overlooked elsewhere, and operated with the kind of technical integrity that my grandfather had instilled in me. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Michael had inherited a successful company and was slowly destroying it through incompetence, I'd built a competitor from scratch that was already threatening Hayes Tech's market position. But I wasn't finished yet. Michael's public misrepresentation of his platform's capabilities had opened a door that I intended to walk through. The next morning, I called a meeting with my senior team. David, Maria, and our 3 department heads gathered in our conference room, coffee in hand, ready to discuss what they assumed would be our standard weekly strategy session. Team, I want to talk about something that happened at the Cybersecurity Summit. Michael Hayes made some public statements about Hayes Tech's technical capabilities that appear to be inaccurate. I pulled up a transcript of Michael's keynote, highlighting the specific claims he'd made about AI-driven behavioral analysis and zero-day exploit detection. I've confirmed with multiple sources that Hayes Tech's current platform doesn't include these features in their standard service offering. This creates an opportunity for us, but it also creates ethical obligations. Maria leaned forward. What kind of ethical obligations? If a cybersecurity provider is misrepresenting their capabilities to clients, those clients have a right to know. More importantly, organizations that are relying on security features that don't actually exist are potentially vulnerable to attacks. David nodded. So we're talking about a public service announcement, not a marketing campaign. Exactly. I want to publish a technical analysis of common cybersecurity platform features and how organizations can verify that they're actually receiving the services they're paying for. Over the next 2 weeks, we drafted what would become known in the cybersecurity community as the Platform Verification Guide. It was a comprehensive technical document that explained how organizations could independently verify whether their cybersecurity providers were actually delivering the features and capabilities described in their contracts. The guide included specific technical tests that IT departments could run to confirm the presence of behavioral analysis engines, AI-driven threat detection, real-time malware scanning, and dozens of other features that were commonly claimed by cybersecurity vendors. It also included a section on red flags in vendor communications, which outlined warning signs that might indicate a provider was overstating their capabilities. Things like vague responses to technical questions, inability to provide specific performance metrics, and reluctance to allow independent verification of security features. I didn't mention Hayes Tech anywhere in the document. I didn't need to. Anyone who read the guide and then applied its verification methods to their current cybersecurity provider would quickly discover any gaps between promised and delivered capabilities. We published the guide on our website and submitted it to every major cybersecurity publication in the industry. Within a week, it was being downloaded thousands of times daily and cited in security blogs across the country. The response from the cybersecurity community was overwhelmingly positive. CISOs and IT directors praised the guide as a valuable resource for holding vendors accountable. Security consultants started incorporating our verification methods into their audit procedures. But the response from organizations that discovered discrepancies between their contracts and their actual services was less positive for some vendors. My phone started ringing constantly, not with complaints, but with requests for assistance from organizations that had used our guide to audit their cybersecurity arrangements and found significant gaps. Ms. Hayes, called Patricia Webb from Cambridge Trust Company, we used your platform verification guide to audit our current cybersecurity services, and we discovered some concerning discrepancies. Would Fortress Security be able to conduct a more comprehensive assessment? What kind of discrepancies did you find? Our provider has been claiming to offer real-time behavioral analysis, but when we ran the technical tests from your guide, We couldn't find any evidence that those capabilities actually exist in our system. Cambridge Trust Company was a Hayes-Tech client. Ms. Webb, I'd recommend first discussing these findings with your current provider. They may be able to clarify which features are included in your service package. We tried that. They told us the tests in your guide weren't designed for their specific platform and that we shouldn't be concerned about the results. That was exactly the wrong answer. Any legitimate cybersecurity provider should welcome independent verification of their services, not discourage it. Ms. Webb, if you'd like Fortress Security to conduct an independent assessment, we'd be happy to discuss your requirements. By December, we'd conducted platform verification audits for 18 organizations, 12 of which were Hayes Tech clients. In every single case, we found significant gaps between the security features Hayes Tech was claiming to provide and the capabilities that were actually implemented. The pattern was consistent. Hayes Tech was selling premium security services but delivering standard platform features. Clients were paying for AI-driven threat detection but receiving basic signature-based scanning. They were paying for behavioral analysis but getting simple rule-based monitoring. They were paying for custom threat intelligence but receiving generic threat feeds. It wasn't necessarily illegal, depending on how the contracts were worded, but it was certainly unethical, and it left clients vulnerable to exactly the kinds of advanced threats that they thought they were protected against. The breaking point came in January, almost a year after Michael had taken over Hayes Tech. I was in my office reviewing our Q4 financial reports when my assistant buzzed me. "Catherine, there's a Margaret Sullivan on line 1. She says she's a reporter with the Boston Business Journal." I picked up the phone. "Ms. Sullivan, how can I help you?" "Ms. Hayes, I'm working on a story about competition in the Boston cybersecurity market. I've been hearing some interesting reports about client migrations from established firms to newer providers. Would you be willing to comment on Fortress Security's growth over the past year?" This was it, the moment when our quiet success would become public knowledge. "Ms. Sullivan, Fortress Security has been fortunate to work with many excellent clients over the past year. We've grown by focusing on technical excellence and transparent service delivery. Can you provide specifics about your growth, client numbers, revenue, employee count?" I gave her the basic figures: 25 clients, $4.2 million in annual revenue, 31 employees. That's impressive growth for a company that didn't exist a year ago. What do you attribute that success to? We provide services that meet genuine market needs. Many organizations are looking for cybersecurity providers that combine technical expertise with transparent communication about capabilities and limitations. I've heard that several of your clients previously worked with Hayes Tech. Is that accurate? Some of our clients have worked with various providers in the past. Organizations change cybersecurity vendors for many different reasons. Are you familiar with concerns that some Hayes Tech clients have raised about discrepancies between promised and delivered security features? My heart rate spiked. Margaret Sullivan had clearly been doing her homework. "Ms. Sullivan, I can't comment on any specific provider's services. I can tell you that we encourage all organizations to independently verify that their cybersecurity arrangements meet their actual needs. You published a platform verification guide that's been widely used for such audits. Was that guide developed in response to any particular market conditions?" The guide was developed because we believe organizations have a right to understand exactly what security services they're receiving. Transparency benefits everyone in the cybersecurity community. Ms. Hayes, one more question. Michael Hayes, the CEO of Hayes Tech, is your brother. Has that family relationship affected the competitive dynamics between your companies? I took a deep breath. "Ms. Sullivan, Fortress Security competes based on the quality of our services and the value we provide to clients. Family relationships don't change the fundamentals of business competition." The article ran 3 days later with the headline, "Startup Challenges Established Cybersecurity Firm in Battle for Boston Market." It was fair, balanced, and factual. It also made it clear that Fortress Security had grown rapidly by capturing clients from Hayes Tech, that those clients had cited concerns about service quality, and that the two companies were run by siblings. The article included a quote from Michael that I found particularly revealing. Market competition is healthy, but we're confident that Hayes Tech's established relationships and proven track record will continue to serve our clients well. No mention of technical capabilities, no discussion of service quality, no acknowledgement of client concerns, just generic corporate speak from a CEO who still didn't seem to understand why his clients were leaving. But the real earthquake came 2 weeks after the article was published, when I received a call that changed everything. Ms. Hayes, this is Agent Jennifer Martinez with the FBI's Boston office. We'd like to speak with you about cybersecurity practices in the financial services sector. My blood ran cold. Agent Martinez, is this about a specific investigation? We're conducting a review of cybersecurity compliance among financial institutions in Massachusetts. Your name came up as someone who's conducted extensive auditing of security arrangements in this sector. I see. How can I help? We'd like to review some of the compliance audits you've conducted, particularly any that identified significant gaps between contracted services and delivered capabilities. Agent Martinez, are you investigating potential fraud? I can't discuss the specific focus of our investigation, but we're interested in cases where cybersecurity providers may have misrepresented their capabilities to financial institutions. I agreed to meet with Agent Martinez the following week. As I hung up the phone, I realized that the platform verification guide and compliance audits had caught the attention of federal investigators who were looking into potential fraud in the cybersecurity industry. The meeting with Agent Martinez took place in a sterile conference room at the FBI's Boston field office. She was accompanied by Agent Robert Chen from the agency's cybercrime unit and a prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office named David Walsh. Ms. Hayes, Agent Martinez began, we understand you've conducted compliance audits for multiple financial institutions that identified discrepancies between contracted cybersecurity services and actual deliverables. That's correct. Can you walk us through your findings? For the next 2 hours, I provided detailed technical explanations of the gaps we discovered between the security features that clients thought they were receiving and the capabilities that were actually implemented. I showed them documentation of AI-driven threat detection that didn't exist, behavioral analysis engines that weren't installed, and custom threat intelligence that was actually generic data feeds. Ms. Hayes, Prosecutor Walsh asked, in your professional opinion, were these discrepancies the result of technical limitations, or did they represent deliberate misrepresentation of capabilities? I chose my words carefully. The discrepancies were consistent across multiple clients and involved the same specific features being claimed but not delivered. That pattern suggests systematic issues rather than isolated technical problems. Agent Chen leaned forward. We understand that many of these discrepancies involved services provided by Hayes Tech. Is that correct? Hayes Tech was the previous provider for several of the organizations we audited. Ms. Hayes, we need to ask you directly. Hayes Tech is run by your brother. Has that relationship influenced your assessment of their services in any way? I looked at each of them. Agents, my technical assessments are based on objective verification of security capabilities. Family relationships don't change what features exist in a cybersecurity platform or what capabilities are actually being delivered to clients. Agent Martinez nodded. We've reviewed your technical documentation, and your findings appear to be accurate and well supported. We may need to ask you to testify about these audits if this investigation moves forward. Are you investigating Hayes Tech specifically? We're investigating potential cybersecurity fraud affecting financial institutions in Massachusetts. I can't provide more details than that. As I left the FBI office, I realized that Michael's incompetence had escalated beyond simple business failure. If federal investigators were looking into potential fraud charges, Hayes Tech wasn't just losing clients. The company was facing possible criminal liability. That evening, I sat in my apartment overlooking the Charles River, trying to process what had just happened. For months, I'd focused on building fortress security and providing superior services to clients who were dissatisfied with Haystack. I'd viewed it as business competition, not criminal investigation. But the FBI's questions made it clear that Michael's misrepresentation of platform capabilities wasn't just incompetent marketing. It was potentially fraudulent billing. Financial institutions that were paying premium prices for AI-driven security features they weren't receiving could argue that they were victims of fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Legal Seafoods on Atlantic Avenue at 8 p.m. Come alone. M." Michael wanted to meet. After months of avoiding direct confrontation, he was finally ready to have the conversation we'd both been circling around. I arrived at Legal Seafoods at exactly 8 p.m. Michael was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking older and more stressed than I'd ever seen him. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. "Catherine," he stood up as I approached, not offering to shake hands. "Michael." We sat across from each other, the same way we had in my conference room months earlier, but this time the dynamic was completely different. Michael looked defeated. "You've destroyed everything," he said quietly. "I built a business, Michael. That's what entrepreneurs do." "You systematically targeted our clients. You published that verification guide specifically to undermine our services. You coordinated with the FBI to investigate us." "I didn't coordinate with anyone. The FBI contacted me because I documented discrepancies between contracted services and actual deliverables. If that's a problem for Haystack, maybe Haystack should examine why those discrepancies exist." Michael's hands were shaking slightly. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The FBI seized our financial records yesterday. They're interviewing our clients, our employees, our technical staff. They're treating this like a criminal investigation." "Is it?" He looked at me with genuine confusion. "Is what? Is it criminal, Michael? Were you deliberately billing clients for services you weren't providing?" "We provided cybersecurity services. We protected their networks, monitored their systems, responded to incidents." "But did you provide the AI-driven behavioral analysis you claimed to offer? The zero-day exploit detection you described in your keynote? The custom threat intelligence you charged premium prices for?" Michael was quiet for a long moment. The platform had those capabilities. Maybe not in the configuration we implemented, but the capabilities existed. "That's not the same thing, and you know it. Clients weren't paying for capabilities that existed somewhere in the software. They were paying for features that you claimed were actively protecting their networks." "It's a complicated technical issue. Clients don't understand the nuances of platform configuration." "Michael, listen to yourself. You're saying that clients don't understand the services they're paying for, so it's okay to charge them for features they're not receiving." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant, and that's exactly why you're in trouble with federal investigators." Michael put his head in his hands. "Catherine, I need your help." For a moment, he looked like the little brother I'd grown up with, the one who used to come to me when he couldn't figure out his homework or when he'd gotten in trouble at school. "What kind of help?" "Tell the FBI that this was all a misunderstanding, that the technical discrepancies were the result of platform configuration issues, not deliberate misrepresentation." I stared at him. "You want me to lie to federal investigators?" "I want you to help me save our family's company." Michael, grandfather's company, provided real cybersecurity services to real clients. What you've been running for the past year isn't the same business. "It's still Haystack, it's still our legacy." "No, it's not. You've turned it into something grandfather would have been ashamed of." Michael looked up at me, his eyes filled with anger and desperation. "So this is your revenge? Destroying the family business because mom and dad chose me instead of you?" "This isn't revenge, Michael. This is consequences." "What's the difference?" I stood up to leave. Revenge is when you hurt someone because they hurt you. Consequences are when someone's actions catch up with them. I didn't make you misrepresent your platform's capabilities. I didn't make you bill clients for services you weren't providing. I didn't make you lie during a keynote speech at a cybersecurity conference. Catherine, please. I built a competing business because I knew I could do better. I published the verification guide because organizations deserve to know what services they're actually receiving. I cooperated with federal investigators because they asked legitimate questions about cybersecurity compliance. I looked down at him. Everything that's happening to you is the result of your own decisions, Michael. I'm just the person who refused to pretend otherwise. As I walked away from the restaurant, I felt something I hadn't expected: sadness. Not for Michael's situation, which he'd created himself, but for what Haystack could have been if he'd bothered to learn the business before trying to lead it. 3 weeks later, the Boston Business Journal ran a front page story with the headline, FBI raids Haystack offices in cybersecurity fraud investigation. The article detailed federal agents seizing computers, financial records, and client contracts as part of an investigation into potential fraud affecting financial institutions throughout New England. The article included a statement from Haystack's newly hired criminal defense attorney, claiming that the investigation was based on technical misunderstandings and that the company had always acted in good faith. It also included quotes from several former clients who described significant discrepancies between the services they'd contracted for and the capabilities they'd actually received. By the end of the week, 6 more Haystack clients had terminated their contracts. The company's stock price, which had been trading on the over-the-counter market, dropped 80% in 3 days. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: James Wilson, the Haystack technical specialist who'd been keeping me informed about Michael's decisions. James called me on a Friday evening, his voice shaky with stress. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. The FBI interviewed me yesterday about Haystack's technical capabilities." "What did you tell them?" I told them the truth, that Michael had been claiming to provide services that we weren't actually delivering, that he'd been billing clients for premium features that we hadn't implemented. "James, you did the right thing." "There's more." They asked me about internal communications, emails where Michael discussed billing strategies. "Catherine, there are documents that show he knew we weren't providing the services he was claiming to offer." My stomach dropped. "What kind of documents?" "Email chains where technical staff explicitly told Michael that specific features weren't included in our platform configuration. Messages where he approved billing for those features anyway." If federal investigators had documentation showing that Michael knowingly billed clients for services he wasn't providing, this wasn't just incompetence anymore. It was wire fraud. "James, what did you tell the investigators?" I gave them everything they asked for. "Catherine, I've worked in cybersecurity for 15 years. I've never seen anything like this. Michael was systematically billing clients for services that didn't exist." 2 days later, Michael was arrested at Haystack's offices during normal business hours. The perp walk was captured by local news cameras and broadcast throughout the region. Michael Hayes, scion of a respected Boston technology family, led away in handcuffs while federal agents continued searching his company's headquarters. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and making false statements to financial institutions. According to the federal indictment, Michael had knowingly misrepresented Haystack's cybersecurity capabilities to multiple clients, billing them for premium services that were never actually implemented. The indictment included specific examples of the fraud. Haystack had charged Boston Community Bank $50,000 annually for AI-driven behavioral analysis that didn't exist. They'd billed Cambridge Trust Company $75,000 for zero-day exploit detection capabilities that weren't installed. They'd charged Middlesex Financial Services $40,000 for custom threat intelligence that was actually a generic data feed, costing Haystack less than $5,000. The total alleged fraud exceeded $2 million over an 18-month period. My parents called me that evening. My mother was crying. "Catherine, they arrested Michael. They arrested our son." "I know, Mom, I saw the news." "How could this happen? How could federal investigators believe that Michael would commit fraud? I took a deep breath. Mom, Michael was billing clients for cybersecurity services he wasn't providing. That's textbook fraud. But he was providing cybersecurity. Haystack has been protecting those clients for years. Dad, Michael was charging clients for specific features like AI-driven threat detection and behavioral analysis. Those features didn't exist in the platform he'd implemented. Those are technical details, my father said. Surely there's some explanation. The explanation is that Michael didn't understand the technical details of his own business, but he billed clients as if he did. My mother's voice turned sharp. This is your fault, Catherine. You published that verification guide. You talked to the FBI. You destroyed your own brother. Mom, I published a guide that helped organizations verify they were receiving the cybersecurity services they were paying for. I cooperated with federal investigators who were looking into potential fraud. I didn't make Michael commit crimes. He didn't commit crimes. This is all a misunderstanding. Mom, the FBI has emails showing that Michael knew he wasn't providing the services he was billing for. That's not a misunderstanding. That's intentional fraud. The line went quiet. You're really not going to help him? My father asked finally. Dad, there's nothing I can do to help him. Michael made decisions that violated federal law. The consequences of those decisions aren't my responsibility. He's your brother. He's a criminal. I hung up, feeling emotionally drained but strangely at peace. For the first time in my adult life, my family couldn't pretend that Michael's failures were anyone's fault but his own. The trial took place 8 months later. I was called as a witness for the prosecution, asked to explain the technical differences between the cybersecurity services Haystack claimed to provide and the capabilities their platform actually possessed. Taking the stand against my own brother was surreal, but I testified truthfully about the technical assessments Fortress Security had conducted and the discrepancies we'd discovered. The prosecutor asked me to explain, in layman's terms, why those discrepancies mattered. Your Honor, cybersecurity is about protecting organizations from real threats. When a bank thinks they have AI-driven behavioral analysis protecting them from insider threats, they make security decisions based on that assumption. If they don't actually have those protections, they're vulnerable to exactly the kinds of attacks they thought they were defended against. Michael's defense attorney tried to portray me as a vindictive sister who destroyed her brother's business out of jealousy. But the prosecution had too much evidence: emails, client contracts, technical documentation, and testimony from Haystack's own employees. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned their verdict, Michael was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $2.3 million in restitution to the financial institutions he'd defrauded. Haystack was dissolved, its assets liquidated to help pay the restitution. My grandfather's company, built over decades of hard work and technical excellence, was gone forever. But something else had taken its place. By the time Michael was sentenced, Fortress Security Solutions had grown into a $15 million business with offices in Boston, Hartford, and Providence. We employed 68 people and provided cybersecurity services to over 100 organizations throughout New England. More importantly, we'd built something I was genuinely proud of. A company that combined technical expertise with absolute transparency about capabilities and limitations. A business that treated clients as partners rather than marks. An organization that hired talented people regardless of their backgrounds and gave them opportunities to excel. We'd also developed a reputation for integrity that money couldn't buy. When organizations needed cybersecurity providers they could trust completely, Fortress Security was at the top of their list. 6 months after Michael's sentencing, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Amanda Foster at Boston University. Catherine, I have an interesting proposition for you. The university is launching a new cybersecurity research center, and we're looking for an industry partner to help design the curriculum. That sounds fascinating, Dr. Foster. What kind of partnership were you envisioning? We want to create a program that trains the next generation of cybersecurity professionals with both technical expertise and ethical grounding. Students who understand that protecting people's data is a sacred trust that should never be compromised for profit. I thought about my grandfather, who'd built his company on the principle that cybersecurity professionals were the guardians of other people's digital lives. Dr. Foster, Fortress Security would be honored to partner with Boston University on that kind of program. The partnership was announced 3 months later. The Hayes Center for Ethical Cybersecurity, funded jointly by Fortress Security Solutions and Boston University, would train cybersecurity professionals who combined technical excellence with uncompromising integrity. My grandfather's name would live on, not in the company that Michael had destroyed, but in an educational program that would teach future generations the values he'd tried to instill in our family. My parents never spoke to me again after Michael's conviction. They blamed me for his downfall, for the destruction of Hayes Tech, and for the end of their social standing in Boston's technology community. I was sad about losing my family, but I wasn't sorry about the choices I'd made. Michael had been given every advantage: family connections, financial resources, an established business, and years to learn from experienced professionals. He'd squandered all of it through arrogance, laziness, and ultimately criminal behavior. I'd started with nothing but my education, my skills, and my grandfather's values. From those humble beginnings, I'd built something lasting and meaningful. 5 years after Michael's arrest, Fortress Security Solutions was featured on the cover of Inc. magazine as one of America's fastest-growing cybersecurity companies. The headline read, "Catherine Hayes built a $50 million business on a simple principle: tell the truth." The article detailed how we'd grown from a one-person startup to a regional powerhouse by focusing on technical excellence and absolute transparency with clients. It also mentioned the Hayes Center for Ethical Cybersecurity and our commitment to training the next generation of security professionals. But the part of the article that meant the most to me was a quote from one of our employees, David Chen, who'd been with us since the beginning. "Catherine didn't just build a successful business," he said. "She built a place where talented people can do their best work while maintaining their integrity." In an industry that's often dominated by hype and overselling, Fortress Security proves that honesty is actually the best business strategy. That evening, I stood in my office looking out at Boston Harbor, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 7 years earlier, I'd been the invisible daughter in a family that valued appearance over substance, connections over competence, and loyalty over truth. Now I was the CEO of a company that employed hundreds of people, protected thousands of organizations, and stood as proof that merit could triumph over favoritism if you were willing to work hard enough and wait long enough for justice to arrive. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something so successful, so valuable, and so lasting that it makes your enemy's failures look petty by comparison. Michael had been given everything and squandered it all. I'd been given nothing and built an empire. In the end, competence always wins over connections, and truth always triumphs over fraud. It just takes patience, persistence, and the courage to bet everything on your own abilities. Thank you for joining me on this journey from overlooked daughter to cybersecurity CEO. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about a time when you had to prove your worth despite being underestimated. Drop a comment below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you believe that merit should matter more than connections, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about people who built their own success despite the odds stacked against them. Remember, your value isn't determined by other people's recognition. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stop waiting for permission and start building your own legacy. Until next time, this is Catherine reminding you that competence compounds daily, but integrity is forever.